This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Welcome to the Xcast X-Files Podwatch, episode 33. Today, we're talking about Season 3 Mythology two-parter, Piper, Maru, and Apocrypha. I'm your host, Sarah Blair, and I've got an exciting guest with me today, Denton Tipton of the X-Files comic, JFK Disclosure. Denton, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm so excited to have you here on the podcast. We were talking just a little bit before we started recording, and you're a fellow University of Tennessee graduate, just like me. Go Vols.
That's right.
Exciting.
That's right. Go Vols. We promise not to play Rocky Top on this podcast.
Do we now? Do we promise that?
Well, we should.
We've already had some singing on the show. Maybe for an extra at the end.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want them to know. We want them to stay all the way through the end.
Exactly. So, all right. So then, Denton, for the listeners who are fans of the show, but maybe haven't had the opportunity to delve into the comics, can you tell us a little bit about the process of that and how you personally got involved with writing for the X-Files comics and especially this issue?
Well, I work for IDW Publishing as an editor, and we got the X-Files license, I think it was late 2013, maybe early 2014. So we got the license, and that randomly got assigned to me because I'd never really watched much X-Files except for when I was in high school a little bit, and then became, in high school, I was a teenager, so I was out on the nights that, I believe it was on Friday nights.
Friday nights, yeah. Friday night, 9 o'clock.
Yeah, so you wouldn't catch me home during those days, so I missed out on a lot of it at the beginning, and so got to play a lot of catch-up. I had a lot of friends that were into it in college, and I actually played the collectible card game when that came out.
I remember that.
Yeah, I played about every one because I was working at a comic shop at the time, so I was doing tournaments and teaching people how to play all the different games, so I learned them all and actually learned a lot about the show through the card game, so that kind of served me well. And we found Chris Ryle is the editor-in-chief, and he found a writer, Joe Harris, and they had met with Chris Carter when we first started everything, and Chris kind of gave us things to avoid and direction on stuff. So we kind of launched our own season 10 at the time because this was a few years before they had even thought about resurrecting the show. So Joe and Chris kind of came up with a basic outline, and then we, took it and ran with it. And Chris and 1013 and, of course, Fox were all part of the approvals process once we would do all the scripts and art and all that. So we kind of did our own season 10, and that went over really well. Then we did a season 11, and then out of the blue, we knew Chris had been trying to get another movie going, but apparently it turned out to be a new TV series. So
yay!
Yeah, so
X-Files.
Yeah, so it was great for everyone except for the comic because we kind of already started doing our own thing, and Chris had had input and blessed everything. So it was canon until it was no longer canon because there's no way that the television show could be beholden to a comic. So
Right.
We understood that. So they did the reboot, they did the revival, and we rebooted the comic, kind of synced up. We got a quick call with Chris when they had everything nailed down for their season 10, and so we had kind of the broad strokes, and so we could avoid what they were doing. And obviously, the first season ended on a cliffhanger, so that proved to be pretty problematic for us. So we kind of tried to shoehorn everything in to that, what we figured to be like a 2 or 3 week span. We did the best we could, and we're still, we wrapped up the series in a few months ago, and then we were kind of waiting to sync up with the new season, and we still haven't had a chance to talk with Chris about it yet. He's been super busy actually, producing the TV show, so he hasn't gotten back to us yet. So we've been doing a few little mini-series in between those, and while we're waiting to get started on the next series that we're going to do. So in addition to the reboot comic, we also launched a couple mini-series based on Mulder and Scully when they were kids. They were both about 12 or 13. I believe Mulder was 13 and Scully was 12, in the stories that we're telling. And it's called X-Files Origins. There were also a couple of books by Jonathan Mabry and Kami Garcia. So we kind of worked with Macmillan on that, so we didn't, tell stories or kind of have things that conflicted, even though everything still went through Fox and Chris Carter for approvals. And that was written by Matthew Dow Smith and Jody Hauser, and our artists on that was Corin Howell and Chris Finoglio, and those were targeted at middle grade kids, so 8 to 12-year-olds. So it's kind of a Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys kind of thing. But since and they never met until the first episode, we had to have them in separate stories, or people would have flipped out. And rightfully so. But we, had constructed a story that kind of ties together, and we did something kind of fun, is have a flip book. So one side was Mulder, the other side was Scully. And Scully's story was set in San Diego during her time on the base, the naval base there. So that kind of ties in a bit with Piper Maru, because she comes back, and we use some of the stuff from this episode to inform that. So we use some of that reference shot, which is so not San Diego. You can tell it's been shot in Vancouver because the just the foliage and the grass and the trees and everything. It was kind of funny that they were trying to play it off as San Diego, but so so that was kind of fun. So there's kind of a tie there, and we did a couple of those mini-series, and the last one wrapped up, and then our regular series had wrapped up as well. So to kind of tide over the fans while we were getting ready for the new series that's going to follow up the season 11 stuff, we were doing some short miniseries, and the first of these was JFK Disclosure, and that just came out last week.
Perfectly timed, right?
Right.
Did you do that? You guys did that on purpose, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
About a year ago, I had read a article about the files going to be released. It was like the 24th anniversary of the JFK Records Act, which said that 25 years there to be released. So I knew that was going to happen. So I was kind of had it.
Way to stay ahead of things there.
Right. I had it dog-eared because that's kind of the one huge conspiracy. They touched on it a bit in Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man, but that was the stories were just things that the lone gunman had collected, so they were not verified. And actually in Apocrypha, they visit the Zeus Faber, Bill Mulder, and Cigarette Smoking Man. So that happened in the 50s. I can't believe early to mid 50s. So they were already in the State Department by that point. So in Musings, when cigarette smoking man supposedly assassinates Kennedy, they're just in the army together. So that one was basically kind of debunked by this episode as not being true. But we kind of took that thread and kind of ran with it. Actually, I had assigned the artist to this first because
the artist was amazing.
Yes, Minton Matthews.
So beautiful.
He's been doing covers for us for a couple of years, and he had done a little bit of interior work, and he'd been itching to do some more storytelling. And one of his, there's two subjects that are of his covers that were super popular with the fans, and one was Fluke Man, which he did covers for when we did a little kind of a sequel to that. Joe Harris came up with that one, so we didn't want to do that one again. So we were kind of looking at something with the cigarette smoking man, and then so I already had this project that was going to kind of involve him in mind, and I told him about it, and he was all over it, and we'd been talking together about working on some comics on our own, and so he really encouraged me to write it myself. So, I being the editor of the book, you really don't want to assign yourself a story to to write. It kind of can be problematic, and so I brought the idea to my boss at the time, Chris Ryle. He was the editor-in-chief. He's now chief creative officer, so he's kind of moved up the ladder. But I ran it by him, and I told him the idea that he had, and he's like, you came up with a concept. I fleshed out what I would want to do with it, and he thought that it was a good idea, and thought it was would be okay for me to write it. So I did.
All right, well, let's get into Piper Maru then. This episode originally aired on February 9th, 1996. It was written by Frank Spotnitz and Chris Carter, and it was directed by Rob Bowman. He's one of my favorite directors on the show. What was your overall impression of, where does it fall for you? And
I don't know. The whole two-parter, it ranks pretty high up there as far as a mythology episode, because they get into Mulder's past, Scully's past, Krychek comes back, and his kind of rivalry with Skinner kind of takes off. Skinner gets shot.
It's jam-packed full of stuff, right?
Just these two episodes, so much happened.
And I know Nicholas Lee's name was intentionally left off the opening credits at the beginning of the show so that it could be a surprise for Alex Krychek's return.
Yeah.
And there was another special guy in there. Michael Bublé was in the episode too as an extra.
Really? What?
In one of the flashback sequences. You'll have to go back and watch for his face. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, one of my favorite things about this episode was Gillian Anderson's performance. I felt like it was really powerful especially when Skinner talks to her about her sister, and she's got a lot of personal stuff coming up to the surface in this episode. How did you feel like she handled that overall?
Oh yeah. She's always great, but this one, she had some really meaty parts of her character to tear into, and yeah, she did it. Yeah, it was fantastic. That scene with Skinner, as you said, she where. I believe Skinner tells her that her sister's murder case has been closed, and that's something very, very difficult for someone to hear, and it was pretty powerful how she reacted to that.
Even with Mulder down in the office, she just presumably comes from this meeting with Skinner and goes downstairs and talks to Mulder, and she's just like, you can tell she's so exasperated with him and like trying not to let her personal stuff interfere, but she can't help but let it all bleed through and bleed together. And I really like that scene between those two because it was just so typical Mulder, and he's so clueless about her state of mind and what all she's going through in that moment. And of course she's not gonna dump on him in the office and all that, but I really like that scene between them. There's a lot going on.
He doesn't follow social cues very well, for sure. And she kind of lays into him a little bit, kind of tired of following all his crazy theories and leads, and he kind of is like, is that what you really think of me? And she kind of backs it up a little bit. So that was a fun little interaction with them. And so much in these two episodes, like that relationship kind of moves forward a little bit, so that was good to see as well.
Right, and we've got Superhero Skinner. I don't know if you've heard a few of my episodes on the podcast, but I'm a huge Skinner fan. He's my favorite guy, so I always love when he shows up, and you can tell he's really struggling with wanting to help Scully, but having his hands tied in the situation, and then he ends up getting shot, which is one of my least favorite scenes. When every time I watch this episode, I just want to be like, Skinner, no, don't be a hero. Stop, don't do it. And then Luis Cardinal just gets him every time. Like every time I hope it's going to come out differently, but it doesn't.
Right. Yeah. Skinner is a great character. And we always joked around with Matthew Dow Smith. In addition to writing X-Files Origins, he was the artist on our main story, the main comic with that Joe Harris wrote for several years. And so we always joked around going to make him draw a shirtless Skinner.
Yes, please.
Right. So
I'll take that any day.
Right. There's a couple of them in there, there's that. I can't remember what episode it is, but where he's like coming down the staircase without his shirt on. So we've got a GIF of that we'd send around all the time. So I'm sure you would have appreciated that as well.
Yeah, I'm sure my pal Dita over at Mitch's Pledgies will appreciate that too. She'll have to go take a look at that. So, to wrap up this episode, we've got a lot. There's so much going on. I feel like we could talk about this for ages, right? But overall, in the whole scheme of things, it really advances the mythology a lot.
Right.
So that's great.
We got the black oil.
The black oil, and can't forget that.
Yeah, which is huge in the mythos.
And all the radiation burns with the people, and
right.
So
and you get to see the black oil get transferred, so you learn a lot about it.
Right, yeah. So I think that was a cool addition to the mythology and all that, because it plays such a huge part later in the Fight the Future movie. So, yeah, that was cool. So how about we move on to Apocrypha?
Let's do it.
This episode aired originally on February 16th in 1996, and it was written by Frank Spotnitz and Chris Carter as well, but this one was directed by Kim Manners, another X-Files legend. So overall, this was kind of just a continuation of the episode. So what did you think about this one compared with Piper Maru? Is it pretty much the same? You're getting the same kind of thing,
right?
It feels like one episode, pretty much.
It does. The direction is a little different. I like the flashback. I love starting out with flashbacks, and you get a bit of the Bill Mulder Spender relationship. So it was kind of cool to see that. The cold open was pretty neat. and with the cigarette smoking man, saying you can trust us, which obviously, if you know the show, you know that's exactly the opposite. So yeah, so I always like the flashbacks, and I actually kind of tapped into this a little bit for JFK Disclosure, because it kind of starts out just a few years after this. So I get to start out with a cool flashback in that story too, so that kind of another little tie to these, because it's kind of where I got a lot of the that relationship between those two at that time. I was able to pull that from that, and
as a writer, it was really fun to see how you sort of incorporated the whole like the era with this in the 60s, and like the flashy Vegas and all of that. And then I could see how you could have, how you pulled from this episode, and it's neat to see pull from here and there and put it all together like a puzzle almost, and sort of like tie everything together.
Right. So like if you're a big X-File, you'll kind of pick up on some of these little Easter eggs, and you're like, oh,
because
okay.
Isn't that what every X-File is missing? Is all the tie? We just want it to be tied up, Chris. If you can hear us now, please just help us tie things up a little bit. From the things I've been reading, that they're going to get into some of the Williams stuff, allegedly. So that'll be really cool to see in the next season. Yes. Yeah. For Apocrypha, how do you think this tied up the ending? Like, I know it was, I definitely want to talk about the very end, but as far as, I feel like Rob Bowman sort of leans a little bit towards the darker side of stuff, and then Kim Manners sort of lightened things up a little bit, especially with that scene with the lone gunman.
Yeah, lone gunman. You gotta have
the
a
lone
little
gunman
comedy.
Ice skating.
Yeah.
Like, how did they get to be such great ice skaters? Honestly,
that is a good question. You'd think Frohicke would be, because he's a salsa dancer, I believe. So he's good with his feet, but the other two, you'd think they would be able to just stand
good old
up.
Frohicke checking out the ladies
the
whole time. Yeah. I love that whole scene and that sequence just makes me laugh every time.
Yeah, they're pretty goofy. You got to have a little comic relief. So it was kind of neat to see them come back on the show in season 10. For that, it was just a dream sequence, but with I believe Mulder was on the mushrooms at the time.
Oh man!
And in our season 10 comic, we brought them back as well, but we had they were clones.
Okay.
Spoilers.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, but it was fun seeing them in action again, and they're always fun. This episode still had some of its some dark parts as well.
Yes, and especially with Mulder and Scully down in the silo, and they get down there, and it's like they run and run and run, and they keep going in the same direction, and they keep making a left. I'm like, how many lefts are you going to make before you come out the same spot? And they just catch you anyway. And so that kind of irritated me. It's just like small nitpicky thing. But like always, in the tradition of the X-Files, they were so close to the truth. That red door with the big old fat turn 13 on it. They got there. And they were so close and yet so far away.
Right.
Yeah. And then you got Krychek ending up in the silo.
Right. And I guess cigarette smoking man kind of just left him there, right?
Oh, yeah. Poor Krychek. And how long was he in there? We don't know. A long time, probably.
Oh, I can't remember which episode it was where they showed he came back.
It was a long time.
Yeah, that poor guy.
And how long... I did like how they kind of tied it all up together, because at the beginning of Piper Maru, when they go down on the ship with the diving team, and they go down there and they find that man inside the salvaged aircraft, or the one that they were going to salvage, and he's banging just like Krychek did. So I thought that was a nice, way to begin and end the two parts, tie it all together.
Mm-hmm. Right.
With everybody screaming to get out because they're trapped with the black oil.
Right. And Skinner, he gets out of the hospital, right? And
yeah, Scully gets him in the ambulance, and then Louise Cardinal comes to assassinate him, but Scully is there waiting, and she goes after him. And I love that part where she's like screaming at him, and that she wants to just get him so bad. But she, her self-control is so admirable in that scene, because it's like she's just looking at him, and all she's thinking is like, you shot my sister, like I want to shoot you so bad. But it's not the right thing to do, and it's so hard to watch her go through that, but she does a great job, Gillian Anderson. And he's like, that's a rough scene, but I bet it was a lot of fun for her to play, because those scenes don't come up too often. Those really juicy parts. So
for sure. And and this episode, they even crammed in some more of the Syndicate. They had well manicured man.
He was my favorite Syndicate guy.
Oh, yeah?
Him so much, yeah. Mr. Mulder. Yeah.
So he meets up with Cigarette Smoking Man, and he also comes and meets Mulder later on in the episode, and gives him some information. So there's just so much going on in these two. It's hard to cover it all.
You really spend a lot of time on them. Unfortunately, this is just the Podwatch episode, so we are about out of time on that. But do you have any other things you want to add, or anything to wrap up? You think we covered what we could? Or?
Yeah. I think we hit some of the highlights on the episodes. Everyone's all watched them, so they know exactly what happens, and so they can kind of see.
Let us know what we missed out on online.
Right. Yes. I'm sure. That's always the fun part.
We'll hear about it, right?
Sure. And it's always fun about online. You get to keep the conversation going after it's posted and got the message boards and all that, so that's fun.
Exactly.
The JFK Disclosure came out this week, the first issue. The second issue will be out November 29th, so that'll get the conclusion of that.
Awesome. Where can we find you online?
I'm on Twitter, just at Denton Tipton. I think I'm on Facebook, of course. I'm more active on Facebook because that's where I can actually kind of keep up. Twitter moves too fast for this old man. But I'm on Facebook at Denton.Tipton. So you can find me there. I'm always posting about the books that are coming out and announcements and stuff. We hope to announce soon what we're going to be doing with the comic next year. Trying to line some stuff up with the show when it returns early next year. So that's always fun, trying to get all that lined up and set, and getting hold of Chris and getting his blessing and all that, which he's so gracious to do, and take the time to do it.
Absolutely. We really appreciate all his work, for sure. All of us fans out there. Even though we get frustrated sometimes, it's an endearing kind of frustration. We love to talk about our favorite show and analyze it and get down to the nitty gritty, right?
Right, exactly. And and once he wraps up some of the stuff, it's done. You're not able to speculate or anything anymore. So exactly. It's still kind of the fun of it. Still having the truth out there and not quite known yet.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you can join in our discussion on Twitter we're at the XCast, the X_CAST on Twitter, and then you can let us know your thoughts over on Facebook. If you look up the X-Files Basement, the XCast podcast fan group, you can find our discussion over there too. We have a lot of fun over there on Facebook, so we hope you all will join us. I'm Sarah Blair again. You can find me on Twitter at Sarah, SarahLBlair, and you can check out my book and my website at sarahlblair.com. And that about does it for us this evening, or whenever you're listening to this. And we thank you all for joining us as always. Until next time, trust no one.